Hey, how you doing? My name's Greg, otherwise known as Elastic Plastic. Today I'm going to take a high poly model and make a low poly model out of it, and then I'm going to bake an ambient occlusion map and show you how to set that up. So here I have a model with 1.3 million faces. It is the Statue of Liberty, and it's pretty detailed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it has a material. So I'm going to say new material on here, and it's going to create a material 01. It doesn't really matter what the name of this one is because it's the high poly one, so it's fine the way it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then select the model, make sure it's selected, hit Shift D to duplicate it, move it off a little bit, then I'm going to hit the escape key so it lands it right on top of it again. And then I'm going to take that second model that I just made and I'm going to rename it to just head. So head. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that head and I am going to decimate it. And I'm going to also make a new material for it. So I'll make the new material first. I'm going to click on this number 2 here so that I take the material 001 and I make a copy of it, my own material, and that becomes material 2. Then I'm going to rename this to just head as the material, right? And that's very important because Horizon's going to look for the material name that you save out with the FBX. So it's going to be head underscore BR for the base and roughness map, and the MEO file that we're going to make is going to be head underbar MEO. So that's what we're going to do here. Is I'm going to click on the shading tab over here, and then I'm going to click into this, and I'm going to hit Control Space so that I blow it up. I'm going to scroll out a little bit. I'm going to grab this principal, make sure I only have the principal. Hit X to get rid of it. Hit Shift A to add a new one. Go to Texture. Whoops. Shift A, go to Texture, then go to Image Texture, and then drop that right about there. It doesn't really matter where you drop it. Then I'm going to pull the noodle from Color and drop it on Surface, and pull it in here. And then I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Head underscore MEO, and that's for metal emission and occlusion. And I'm going to make that times 2 so that I get a 2K texture, 2K by 2K times 2. And then I'm going to make sure everything else is okay, and I'm going to click boom. And that should do it for that. I get to hit Shift Space, Control Space again, so that I go back out to the full thing. And now I can go over to my layout again. And now I'm going to decimate this model. So I'm going to turn off the regular head, so I only see this one. And then I'm going to go to my little modifiers tab, the little wrench. I'm going to click the modifier, add modifier, and decimate. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to knock the ratio down to 5 thousandths, or 0.005. And once it gets done calculating that, I can apply it. It's going to bring it down from 1.3 million faces down to 6558. And then I'm going to click the little down arrow here and click apply, or I could have just hovered over here and hit Control A. And as you can see now, the model is pretty decimated. It's a much lower poly model than it was. If we go in here and we look at it, it's not too great. Okay, so go back out into object mode. I'm going to go over to UV editing now. I'm going to unwrap this. So I'm going to come to my UV editor. I'm going to make sure I have my model selected. I'm going to hit period on the numpad so I zoom in on it. And then I am going to hit U to unwrap it. But first I want to make sure that it is shaded properly. So I'm going to tell it to shade auto smooth, which, as you can see now, I had to go to object mode to do that, by the way. I hit tab to go to object mode. And then now I'm going to hit tab to go back into edit mode. Now the object is auto smoothed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click on it, or sorry, not going to right click. I'm going to hit the letter U, and then I'm going to say Smart UV Project, and I'm going to tell it that I want an island of 1/100th. That's the margin, so that it puts a little space between the islands. You can pack it in tighter or looser depending on how you prefer it. I like to go with at least 100. And there's our UV unwrapped map. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my shading here, and I'm going to make sure that this is selected because that's where we're going to be baking to. And then I'm going to go to our render tab over here, and I'm going to change it from EV down to cycles. And then you're going to see that it's got a max samples here. I'm going to set it to 16 just for an illustration, um, just to show you what the max samples does. And this is under render. There is a viewport max samples as well. I'm gonna do it under the render because that's what the baking engine uses. And then I'm going to ignore Simple Bake because that's a product that I bought that does a lot of this automated, but it's still a little bit confusing. And I'm going to expand the bake tab, and then I'm going to tell it that the baking type I want to do is ambient occlusion, and I want to do selected to active, and I want to drop this down, and I want to extrude the object. If we hover over this, it tells us that it says inflate the active object by the specified distance. And it says this helps matching points that are near to the outside of the selected object meshes. So basically what that does is if I turn this back on and then I come up here and I hit the period, you'll see that there's a lot of Z fighting going on. And it will bake it like this if I do not extrude it some. But when I extrude it, when I tell it to extrude it, I'm going to tell it to do 1 meter, right? What it's going to do is it's going to get one of the models out of the way so it can bake the other model, the texture on it. And basically, I'm going to select the head first, the high poly model first, then I'm going to control select the low poly model. And you'll see that when I selected the high poly model, it's showing me the principal shader there. But when I control click on the low poly model, it shows me now down here. It shows me my texture. That's what we want, and we only want this texture highlighted because that's where it's going to bake it to. So now, without any further ado, we should be able to click bake, and it's going to bake for us. And now if I turn off the high poly model, you can see our low poly model. I'm going to hit control space. You can see our low poly model has been baked, and you can see it looks kind of speckly, right? You can see all these little speckles and whatnot. That's because we went with 16 samples. So I'm going to turn the samples up now to, I like to go with at least half of what I'm baking the texture to. So this is a 2K texture. So I'm going to make sure that the number of samples is at least 1024. And now I'm going to rebake it. So to rebake it, I got to turn the high poly one back on, select the high poly, control, select the low poly. You see now the head MEO is selected, and I am going to click bake again. And now it waits a few seconds as it does some maths. And we're done. Okay, now I can turn off the high poly model again and go back in and take a look at this low poly model. And look at that. Very nicely done. You see all of these here, all the stuff that's on the head here. If I turn it back down to just showing me the viewport shading, you could see that a lot of that detail isn't even there. It's just drawn on there. So there's the difference between the low poly. It's the same model. It's just that one's got a texture mapped onto it. And if I go back in here, you can see that it's the same model. It's just got the textures mapped on it. Pretty cool. So we're getting away with 6,000 points, or 6,000 faces, or 6,500 faces here, and doing that. So now what we need to do to complete this is we need to save this image out that it just made. So if we go back over to our UV editor, we can see here that the image has a little star on it, and we look and we see that it did actually bake our image down, and we can look at the bigger ones, and I can deselect everything so you can see the images, the textures there. Really cool. But what it's done now is it's saved it as a grayscale to the RGB to all three channels, and we don't need that. We need to knock that down to just the blue channel because MEO, the red channel, is the metal, the E is the emissive, and the O is the occlusion map. And all we want to do is save this as an occlusion map for Horizon to load in and use it on top of the occlusion map. So I'm going to hit Save As here, and then I'm going to click on my high-low tutorial, and I'm going to save it in head MEO PNG, and hit Save Image As. And that's that. So that's saved. Now we need to save the model out. So we're going to select the model, make sure the model's selected. We're going to go to File, we're going to go to Export, and we're going to say as a FBX. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come down here, high-low tutorial, and we're going to name it head tutorial. And then I'm going to hit export FBX. Oh, wait, before I hit export FBX, I want to make sure I have selected objects only. If I don't, it's going to save that 1.3 with it. So good catch. And then boom. So now what we need to do is we need to go over into Photoshop, and we need to take and we need to open and bring in that that thing. So I'm going to open up my File Explorer. I'm going to go over to my Documents folder. I'm going to go to my TriMesh. I'm going to go to my high-low tutorial, and then I'm going to take this head MEO PNG, and I'm just going to drop it into my Photoshop and load it up. So now over here we got our layers, and it's a solid layer, and I'm going to go into channels, and you see I got the RGB channel. If I select over here, then I come out here and I hit A, or sorry, not A, Control A. There you go. If I hit Control A out here, you'll see the dancing ants around everything, and then I can select the green channel by hitting Shift, and now I got both red and green, and I'm just going to come out here, and I'm just going to hit Delete, which is going to make it my background color, which is black. Then I'm going to click back on the RGB, and now I've got nothing but the blue channel. I've got nothing but the blue channel highlighted. So the other two channels are now black, and I can hit File, and then I can export, and then quick export as PNG. It's going to remember my other thing. I'm going to say TriMesh, which is at the top. I'm going to say high-low tutorial, and then I'm just going to save it out right over top of the original. And now that's ready to go into Blender. I mean into Horizon. So now I'm not going to bore you with that part of it. Basically, you just you take your FBX file and you take your MEO file. Now you're also going to need a BR file. So if you noticed if I go up one here to the TriMesh and I go to my final, you'll see that I have a book BR and a book MEO. The book MEO is the material, the metal emissive and occlusion, and the book BR is just a 256 by 256. I could have made it a 1 by 1 pixel really because it's just a color, right? But I think there's probably a minimum of like 16 by 16. I'm not sure. So just to be safe, I went 256, 256. It's a very small file, 2K. So basically what happens here is this file will be my base and roughness. If I had, say, a different map that I had all the cool coloring of, say I got a guy and I got skin color and t-shirt color, and, and then I bake the ambient occlusion as the MEO. It's two separate maps, and Horizon will load them both and use just the occlusion here. So that's shown here with the torch, because I got the torch. I got like a little gold section of the torch and a little black section of the torch down in the corner of my map. So you can see on the MEO file, it's pretty much the same. Anyway, that's it. That's the quick tutorial on how to do that. Cheers. Hope it helped.